good afternoon, and welcome to The Signal on CBC Radio in Newfoundland and Labrador and anywhere on your CBC Listen app. I'm Heather Barrett in St. John's, and I'm filling in for Adam Walsh while he takes a break. On our show today, we're talking about the bountiful food harvest in Newfoundland and Labrador right now, and how do we waste less of it? How do we get more of it to the people who need it? We're going to brainstorm some solutions. My guests this afternoon are Barry Fordham, co-founder of Sharing the Harvest NL. Barry's in our St. John's studio. And joining us on the line from Toronto, we have Jackie Marchildon, the interim VP of Marketing and Communications for Second Harvest, a food rescue network based in Toronto. We want to hear your thoughts and suggestions as well. How can we get some of our wild fruit, our meat, and our fish onto the tables of those who need it more, or at least find a use for some of it? You can drop us an email, thesignal@cbc.ca. You can text 709-327-8206, or you can call 1-800-563-8255 or 722-7111. Now, Barry, welcome to the Signal studio.
Thank you for having me, Heather.
And Jackie, thank you for joining us from Toronto.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, Jackie, I want to start with you. Can you tell us a bit about what Second Harvest does?
Yes, of course. So Second Harvest is Canada's largest food rescue organization. And so we work all across Canada and all across the supply chain, essentially finding good surplus edible food, literally from anywhere that has food, and connecting it to nonprofits and food charities that are in need, that are getting food to the people that need it most all across Canada.
Can you give us a sense of how big an issue food waste is across Canada?
Yes, for sure, too. So, some of the work that we do is really focused on advocacy, and to really be good at doing that advocacy work, you need to know the problem that you're facing. And so the research that we launched this week was an update to a research report from 5 years ago that really quantified how much food was being wasted across Canada, and really where that waste was happening. And so we found with our new research that 46.5% of all of our food is being wasted every single year. And so that's 21.18 million metric tons of food waste, just, food that's meant for Canadians to have. And what's worse about that is that 41% of that is avoidable. And so that's good food that could be rescued and redistributed to support communities all across Canada. It's enough food essentially to feed 17 million people 3 meals every single day for a year.
Oh, my goodness. I see Barry Fordham here in the studio just shaking his head.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I know, Jackie, on this show, we're going to be focusing on a lot of the wild food found in Newfoundland and Labrador, a lot of the berries and the fruit from trees and the fish and the meat that's available from hunters this time of year. Now, I know that you work with communities in big cities, but you also work in rural and northern places. I know you do work in Iqaluit. Like, what types of things do you do in the more rural and northern parts of Canada?
Yeah, so one of the things that we always kind of joke about is that we say, Second Harvest, we've got a guy for that. We'll really do everything that we possibly can, logistically speaking, to get surplus food from point A to point B. And obviously, exactly like you said, that looks really different in a city than it does in rural areas. And so, for food going to the north, we have a sea lift program, and that essentially takes, honestly, like months and months of planning and preparation. And so, there's so many different factors to that we don't always have control over, especially when it comes to the climate. This year, our sea lift, we had expanded it into new communities, and we had, food going from our warehouse in Toronto to then going to Edmonton. It was supposed to leave by barge from the Hay River, but the water levels had changed due to climate change. And so we had to redirect some of it to the Yukon, and some of it had to get on a small seaplane. And there were so many different elements to getting the food out to where we needed it to go. But we work all across the supply chain and with some incredible third-party logistics providers as well, to make sure that food gets where it needs to go. We really pride ourselves on the fact that, we're constantly rescuing food that's really healthy. We rescue so much perishable food, but we also do rescue food that is shelf stable for longer when it needs to go on those long treks as well. So there's a couple different ways that we go about this. One of those, like I said, is really working with third party logistics, and really any food that's available, we will make sure that it gets somewhere and is used. But we also have the Second Harvest Food Rescue app, and what that does all across Canada is it allows any type of food donor to really post a donation that's available to them, and it notifies our huge network of nonprofits, over 4,000 different nonprofits, that there is a donation available, and they can claim that if it's in their area and they want to go get it.
Well, okay, that gives us an overview of what your group does. Now, Barry Fordham here in our studio. Tell me about Sharing the Harvest NL. What does your group do?
We collect, buy, pick, harvest, store outdoor foods of Newfoundland and Labrador. For example, when we started off the group first, we were concentrated with moose and caribou meat, which is what our lobby was about. But since then, we've discovered that there's more to it than just the moose and the caribou. All kinds of country foods, vegetables, etc. And the feelings that people are left with after consuming or even getting them are what it's turned into now, what we call comfort food, is how people react to it. There's studies going on. I was on a Zoom meeting yesterday up in Labrador with the long-term care facilities trying to incorporate country food into that. And so it's a long hill battle. We finally got underway, and we haven't looked back since. And each year we seem to come up with a different type of country food and more food banks to give to.
What kinds of, when you're talking about country food, what kind of food are you talking about?
Well, for example, I'm glad you asked. Thank you. This past year, we bought and donated 40 seal flippers, 20 rabbits, over 700 plus capelin, 80 pounds cod fillet, 10.5 gallons of blueberries, 60 pounds rhubarb, 50 pounds carrots, 50 pounds turnips, 11 gallons of parish berries, 20 plus chicken, 20 bottles of seafood sauce and packs of lards, over 50 pounds of apples. We had one charity moose to come to us. I got 20 brace of rabbits coming and 50 pounds saltfish yet to come. And we're looking for more stuff to get besides that.
Wow, that can feed an awful lot of people.
That does, and that's a big mouthful too.
Jackie, what do you make of that?
I mean, I think that's great. And it speaks volumes to the fact that there's so much food that can be redirected to food banks, to people that are really getting out there and making sure that, the millions of Canadians that are facing food insecurity are able to get this food that we know is out there.
Now, Barry, tell me a little bit about how Sharing the Harvest NL started. Like, where'd you get the idea?
Well, I was a hunting and fishing guide in '95 onwards for 10 years, and I used to deal with a lot of American clientele, and they talked about the sharing, or hunters feeding hunters, helping the hungry program. And I was aware of it a little bit before that, but in 2008 I seen a story in an outdoor magazine, myself and my daughter Chloe was looking at it, about hunters helping the hungry or feeding the hungry in Nova Scotia. And I said, in Nova Scotia, why not here? And so began our lobby since 2008 to 2020, trying to convince the government to let us do this. And, there was a lot of legislative changes and a lot of legalities, et cetera, but it shouldn't take that long. But now it is in effect. So now we are donating. And we'd like to see it right across the island, indeed the province itself, and just trying to get the word out there. And I think there's a bit of stigma associated with food banks in that people are kind of not focused on non-perishable food items. Mm-hmm. But now we see that we can get perishable food items such as meat and these outdoor foods, etc. And the food banks do want them. The clientele definitely want them. It went from first year of 2020 to Single Parent Association. Somebody came down to get the food hamper, and they looked into the hamper and said, "What's that?" I said, "Moose." "What? Moose? Where'd that come from?" To now, the clientele are phoning ahead to the food banks that I deal with and ask them, "Do you have any country food?"
Oh.
So it's turned around quite a lot, and it's very self-rewarding. I'm not getting anything out of it other than the feeling and the hair stuck up on my arms. I'd like to give a shout out to my two directors, Lucas Roberts, and my son Shane Fordham, and soon be another director coming along soon, hopefully.
Well, I know that if you shoot a moose, even if you're going, say, halves on the license, like half a moose makes an awful lot of meat.
Yes, indeed, and I'd like to make a special plea to hunters. We as hunters have always had a history of sharing the harvest. However, now with this new type thing, we seem to we hold game food in a high regard, in such a high regard that we tend to hoard it, and hoard it so much to the point that it's at the bottom of the deep freezer towards the end of the year. And what happens with it then? It gets tossed in the garbage most times. And that's a shameful waste of a wildlife resource. And it's a shameful waste, again, to the people of Newfoundland and Labrador who could really need it. And so I'm making a plea to you big game hunters out there today to make a donation. It doesn't have to be a full moose quarter. It doesn't have to be, just one package. It could be anything at all. You can call us and we'll give you all the information that you need, redirect you where you need to go, et cetera, et cetera.
Now, Jackie, I got to wonder, how much food is sort of sitting in freezers waiting for a time when someone might need it, when it could actually be moved around to people who actually do need it?
Yeah, I think that's a problem kind of across the supply chain, and something that we're really focused on right now is the issue that best before dates are playing in food waste as well,
Mm-hmm.
where, let's say a grocery store or something has a whole lot of food, like you're saying, sitting in a freezer or whatever it is, and they're really kind of waiting until that last minute to donate it because they really don't want to miss a sale. And, there's a couple of things with that, Barry, exactly like you said, like if people have surplus food, why not donate it instead of hoarding it, And so, something that we really touch on in the report too is really, we need to implement measuring mandates, because what gets measured gets managed. If businesses are realizing how much food is being wasted due to poor inventory, or they realize that there's this opportunity to donate the food, they're only going to do that if they're kind of being forced to track that, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, look, if anyone listening wants to weigh in on this, you can email the Signal at cbc.ca. You can text 709-327-8206, or you can call 1-800-563-8255 or 709-722-7111. We're talking about matching up all the wild food in Newfoundland and Labrador with people who could really use that. And now we got someone on the line who has some thoughts about this. Andrew Younghusband joins us from New Melbourne. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, how you getting on?
Oh, I'm
Andrew.
grand. So, look, you've been thinking a lot about this. I know. Tell us about the apple trees in your property.
Oh, geez, there go my idiot dogs because I'm talking. So I'm from town, and I got a place out in New Melbourne when I was like in my early 20s. And when I got one of my first decent TV gigs and was sitting on a bit of money, I planted 10 or 12, give or take, apple trees that I bought at a nursery in Spaniards Bay. And it was all because my neighbor had apple trees that were like 40 or 50 years old. And those trees were huge, and I could never get over the amount of fruit they gave. There was like more than 100 pounds of fruit on each tree. So I subsequently planted this dozen trees or whatever. And honest to God, all I do is cut the grass around them. They went 10 years without even having the grass cut around them. They just kind of went feral. And now they're like my neighbors were back in the day. 25 years later, those trees the bigger ones produce over 100 pounds of apples a year. And so, it's become a community, not event, but everybody out here knows that I've got apple trees and knows that they can go pick them. And so there's a steady belt of people there checking them out from September on. There's different varieties. They come ripe at different times, and locals and myself pick them, and we can't keep up with it. There's that much apples come off the trees that there's more than one small community can sustain. And of course, there's all sorts of other apple trees in the neighborhood as well. And so this year I started, a kind of a side hustle business of dealing with restaurants, and I was selling them to restaurants and stuff. And I wound up selling the bulk of my apples to the guys that make Mozzie cider out in wherever it is, Portugal Cove, I think, or Portugal. But so they're like, once you start talking to people about where these apples can go, apples in particular, if that's the conversation that the part of the conversation that I can have, you find out that there are places that want them, and so many people see their fruit fully developed, drop off, and rot on the ground, and they go I just don't know what to do with this. And I was one of those people, and it's really, you just to find out where it can go and who wants it, It's just a matter of talking about it more, and you'll find out. It was one of the restaurant owners that told me about the Mozzie Cider guys, and they're not a charity. They paid me for the apples, so it was a great deal. And I was just talking to Buddy then, and I said, like, do you want me to mention you, Buddy, at Mozzie Cider? And he was like, sure, you can if you want. And I said, how's it going up there? And he goes, well, we're looking at 3 tons of apples in the brewery right now, the cidery, because they're making cider. And they got 5,000 to 6,000 pounds, like wow. 3 tons of apples that they're processing right now. And he goes, it's not enough. If anybody backs the pickup truck up with apples, we'll buy more. We're buying it from anybody who'll take them. Foraged apples, crab apples, sweet apples. Period. We're taking them.
Wow. I know, Andrew, you sent me some photos of some of the apples that you've got from the trees. And, you've got a lot in different varieties.
Yeah. I think I planted 5 varieties. And we moved around the corner. I live, that house was in New Melbourne. I still live in New Melbourne, but I live in a different property now. And one of the first things I did when we got the new property was plant apple trees. I planted 20 because they just don't go wrong. And they're like, if you're planting spruce trees, well, you can just dig one up from the woods and move it. That's free. But if you're planting any other kind of tree, you're paying the same price as you're paying for a fruit tree. So just upon moving in here, we planted plums, we planted apples, we planted pears, we planted cherries. If it fruits, we're planting it.
Okay. Now, do you think there's something to learn here, even from municipalities and people that do garden and tree planning?
Well, here's what I learned. I put up a little Facebook post that said, I just harvested 400 pounds of apples off my trees that have been neglected for 25 years. And on that post, I said, I just wonder why we're not planting trees up and down residential roads. And I don't think I've ever posted anything on Facebook that got more likes and more shares.
Yeah.
That thing got shared like 50 times and hundreds and hundreds of likes and they're still getting, recognition two weeks after I posted it. So that just tells me that, people are interested in the idea of this. If we're going to have trees and green areas that are planted by municipalities and planted by new suburbs, why would you not plant food?
And it strikes me that another part of the equation here is actually reaching out and trying to find people and matching people up with that food.
I'm not exactly sure I know what you mean. Like I say, I think that talking about it, you find the people who want it. And I mean, if it's in a residential area, you just take it. Like I spent a few of my very, very, very young years, I barely remember, in Australia. And the street that we lived on, I was talking to my mother about this the other day, the street that we lived on was lined with plum trees. It was the only tree on the street were plum trees between the sidewalk and the road, and they were massive and mature, and there was parrots and birds, and every single person on the street lived on plum jam all year long because when the plums developed, they belonged to the people who were there. And so, everybody had plums. It was just part of life. People were making plum jam for the month that they were in maturity, and that was just normal. Just like everybody here has blueberry jam in their pantry, everybody in that neighborhood had plum jam because it grew on the street.
Yeah, Barry, what do you make of that?
It's a great idea. There's an example of it there in Sobeys in Howley Estates. The city, I guess, planted some apple trees there. And to take it even further, Andrew, that's a fantastic idea. And it's just making the awareness, like you say, to get the word out there to make people more aware of it. I know that back in the day, and I love that term, there wasn't any apples because we as young fellas used to be going around as passage of becoming a man to raid the apple tree, and so a lot of times, so you never see the apples the size that they are these days. I'm amazed by it. It's only the past number of years I've really took notice to it.
Yeah, and I think back in the day too, apples, if you throw away a Granny Smith seed, an apple tree will grow, but it's not a Granny Smith. And I think that a lot of the crabapple trees that we saw growing up were just like apple cores that had sprouted and grew, and they grew golf ball-sized tart things that were not great eating apples at all. But there's just so many varieties, and the genetics of tree growing has proceeded in such a way that there are dozens of varieties that do really well to grow baseball-sized or larger apples in our environment, in our climate. And they're, they're not a lot more expensive than buying a maple tree or a cedar or something else that neighborhoods are classically planting. I just think it's wacky to not just add to the food chain.
All right. Well, those are excellent points, Andrew. I'm going to let you go now because I know you're super busy. So that is Andrew Young-Osmond. He's an actor, writer, producer, and a farmer, and just an all-around busy, handy guy out in New Melbourne in Trinity Bay. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you. See you later.
Thanks. Yeah, Barry.
Yeah, so just to point out about what Andrew said, and is very correct what he's saying. Most people, I think, look at the apples on the ground and say to themselves, if there's only something to do with them. Well, I think part of the equation lies with the food banks. The food banks should be doing a little bit more, reaching out to the general public. Do up flyers is what I was saying. Make up an information sheet saying we Food Bank Joe would like to have some apples if you have some in your community. People seeing that then would become more aware and then maybe take that plunge into picking those apples and bringing them into the food banks.
Jackie, what do you make of all this?
I mean, I love the idea of communities kind of banding together to find ways to get food to people that need it. And I think what it really comes down to, from our perspective, is that kind of across the board, we see that people don't value food the same way that they used to. The cost for food has gone up, but the value that we place on it in a lot of cases has gone down, unfortunately. And I think exactly like what you're saying, finding ways to save food at every level is great.
I'm wondering if people may think differently about wild apples or locally grown fruit, especially if it doesn't look as blemish-free as something you get in a supermarket, or maybe stuff that's fallen on the ground. It doesn't look perfect. Do people kind of have a bias against that, I wonder?
Yes.
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 100%. Yeah. And we're seeing that too, even from the perspective of, the grading specifications that the government put into place, as well as the specifications coming from retailers, that has gotten worse in the last 5 years. So basically, the grading system at the government level is pretty consistent. The government will choose a grade based on color, texture, quality, whatever, and decide that produce falls into one category or another. But retailers often go above and beyond those regulations. And because people are being much pickier about the way that they're doing groceries now, and we can't blame them, right? With the cost of living and grocery prices going up so much over the last few years, retailers are assuming that consumers aren't going to want to buy something with a blemish or a crooked carrot or whatever it is. And so the specifications that they're putting on produce have gotten worse. And so there's more waste happening higher up the chain because farmers aren't able to sell, something that has a little mark on it or something, because retailers won't take it, because retailers are afraid that consumers aren't going to take it.
So how do we convince people that, an apple that maybe comes from a local tree that might be a little bit smaller, might be a little bit funny shaped, might have a little mark on it, is just as good for you, maybe even better than something you get in the supermarket? Barry?
Provide public information about it, saying that, letting the general public know that the apple, just because it fell on the ground, is not poisonous. It's still good. And, to the food bank, they could, instead of giving the apple out to somebody to eat whole, they could peel it, crush it up, and make it into applesauce.
That's true. You can make things with it.
Yes, so there's different things to do other than just the physical look of the apple or fruit or whatever it is itself.
Okay, and if you want to weigh in on this, you can text the Signal at 709-327-8206. Drop us an email, thesignal@cbc.ca, or you can call 1-800-563-8255 or 709-722-7111. Got to tell you about a text we received. It says, our listener says, listening to your show about food wastage, perhaps municipalities should plant apple trees all over their towns and cities. Then folks who need it will just take it, as Andrew Young-Osmond just said. Yeah.
Sounds, yeah.
And I believe we have a caller on the line with us now. Jim Winter is joining us from St. John's. Hello, Jim.
Hi, how are you?
Hey,
Hi.
Jim.
Hi, Barry. How you doing?
Great. Thanks for joining us.
What do you think, Jim?
Well, I just was interested in the overall idea of food wastage. My daughter lives in France, and a few years back they passed a law in France that supermarkets are under regulation in concerning of what they do with their oversupply of food. They're not allowed to just chuck it out. And, of course, here, we would have to have legislation passed in Ottawa to do that. And we've all seen the results of Ottawa's attempts to have any control over the supermarkets whatsoever. They all go in there and to the committee hearings, and they say, yeah, and then they carry on exactly the same. But if you had a law regulating the disposal of food from commercial operations, you certainly would increase the availability of food to those who need it, who are, food insecure, food banks, all kinds of ways that you could utilize it instead of the way it is right now, which is under the total control with no regulation and no observation as to what they do with the food of the big supermarket chains. So I think maybe they should take a look at the regulations in France. Now, that would require some political action, so maybe that'll never happen. But it certainly is worth thinking about.
Okay, that's a really good point. What do you think, Jackie?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are a lot of legislative changes that could really help us. And, we're going to be doing quite a bit more advocacy work and working closely, on some of that in the coming months for sure. I completely agree that putting in policy has to happen, right? People aren't going to do anything if they don't have to. We know that the industry does divert more food waste to things like animal food and animal feed, and composting, and does send less to landfills now, primarily due to organic landfill bans. And so we have seen a little bit of a shift there, which is great. But not a lot of that avoidable food waste really goes to nonprofits. It's 3.3%, I think, that actually goes to nonprofits, even though we know that giving surplus food to nonprofits cuts food-related greenhouse gases 12 times more effectively than composting. And so, I think if we can find ways to incentivize businesses to do it, we're 100% all for that. In the States, there are tax incentives to really motivate businesses to donate surplus edible food. And we definitely think that we'd love to work with the government to figure out how we can set targets and mandate measurements and track progress that way too.
All right. Well, look, Jim, I'm going to have to let you go because we've got some callers standing by. But thank you for adding your thoughts on this.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for hearing me out.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Jim.
All right.
Bye.
Back to the phone lines now. We're joined by Peter Gardner from St. John's. Hello, Peter.
Hello. Interesting program. Two quick things. First of all, I saw a program, it might have been here or in the UK, in which they could not sell carrots which were not perfect. So the supermarkets heavily discounted them and called them wonky carrots, and they sold out. That was one.
Huh.
The second is that in London now, there is a multimillionaire gave up his business, bought some vans, and arranged with all the big supermarkets who throw out perfectly good food when the next truck is coming overnight to call his company. They take their vans, this is all donated, and they go into the warehouses, and the only thing is they have to remove everything by 6 o'clock the next morning, and they take it. There was even a case where an entire truckload of spaghetti noodles, they were going to throw it out because it was in the wrong place, and he managed to get the whole lot moved, and they gave 6 or 7 boxes to people all over the Port District of the East End of London.
Okay.
And that's what they're doing. They're clearing out stuff. And the companies themselves, like Sobeys, call and say, we've got a truckload, we've taken this off the shelf, it's going to be past due tomorrow. If you collect it by 6 o'clock in the morning, you can have it for free.
Interesting. Okay.
And London is doing that all over now. There we are. That's my story.
Jackie. Oh, thank you, Peter. Jackie, what do you make of that?
Yeah, I love that. And that's very similar to how Second Harvest really works, right? Like, especially when we're working with those large grocery stores, is that they will, they'll do it through our app, or they'll give our food rescue team a call and say, we've got 16 pallets of clementines. Can you take them? And we'll say, yes, absolutely. And it doesn't matter where we are in Canada because we have people in every province and working across the territories. And so, luckily, we know our communities really well. Like, just in Newfoundland and Labrador last year, We rescued, over 400,000 pounds and worked with, something like 124 different nonprofits in the area. And so really knowing the community that you're working in, I think it keeps coming back to that in this show, right? Is making sure that communities are talking to each other is really key to figuring out how to connect people to that food.
Well, when Peter was talking about the wonky carrots, it just put me in mind of a photo a friend of mine posted on Facebook recently. She took carrots up out of her own garden, and there's kind of a bit of a carrot that was like two carrots joined together, and it was actually kind of a naughty looking photo, just the veggie that was pulled up. But like if that was being put in a retail situation, it probably wouldn't be even put out for retail sale. And it's perfectly good carrot.
And it costs the same to create, right?
Yeah.
That's the other thing for farmers, creating a perfectly straight one versus like there's no control over that.
Right. That puts me in mind, too. I'm into random association now. People who plant their own vegetable gardens, like, maybe some people, just do it as a hobby or for fun. But oftentimes you get more of one thing than you could use. Like, what can you do with it if all of a sudden you're, over enthusiastic about your carrots and you're not going to use all of them? Barry?
Well, I guess you recognize the fact that you are going to have a surplus harvest.
Right.
And especially this year with the way the weather is, I'm sure that almost everybody has surplus harvest.
Yeah.
Had a very good growing season. But yet still, we still don't have the thought in us about donating it. And, it's only relatively new, too. With my group, it's since 2020. And there's other groups that, farmers sometimes donate. Salvation Army is famous for getting donations and that. And just making more public education. And now that this movement has started, it's just rolling forward. There's no going back now. Mm-hmm. It's just forward. And as we move forward, there are more and more solutions, more and more products, more and more people getting involved, which is going to make a difference eventually, I hope.
Yeah. It actually puts me in mind of something that I saw posted on your social media page from the students at Bayside Academy in Port Hope Simpson. I think that our friends on the north and the south coast of Labrador are some of the best people in the province when it comes to sharing food and sharing wild food and resources. So the really cool thing that they did, they talked to a couple of hunters in the community. They got, I believe, a quarter of moose. They called it a 500-pound tuvak. And between them all, the students worked on the carcass. They provided 28 bottles of meat, enough meat to be minced up for 30 or 40 burgers, 40 meals of roasts for 2 to 4 people, and stewed meat for 75 individual meals. They're also storing the heart, liver, and kidneys in the freezer. The bones were kept for soups. The head is safe for anyone who wants to make a boiler of potted meat. And the other 3/4 are being prepared by a butcher in Forto. So there's all kinds of hunters and elders and guardians and community youth and school principals and teachers involved. Like, what a great idea.
It's fantastic, yes. And we, in our meeting, one of our Zoom meetings that I had yesterday, a gentleman, Chris Peters, I believe, I'm sorry, Chris, if I got your name wrong, in St. Barnes, has a vegetable greenhouse built down by the gathering place. And he has his students going down tending the vegetable garden in the greenhouse. As well, he's also reached out to Kimberly Orme, and I give her a shout out for Fishing for Success out in Petty Harbour, and had his students go out there. So, it's just that kids in the city in particular, even kids in rural areas too, still now, are starting to lose touch, lose the functionability, losing the drive to have gardens or to go fishing or whatever. And, interesting story, when I was a young fella on the wharf growing up, all the fishermen said, "You're younger than I am, get down, go, get aboard the boat and get that, or get that bucket of water." And I find still today, I'm still that young fella, and they're asking me to get it. And here I am at the age I'm at, because there aren't that many young kids at it anymore.
Okay,
so that's what we need to do, is educate the young kids.
Going to hold that thought, because we're going to go right now to Becky Shea. Becky is a fruit rescue coordinator with Humber Valley Fruit Rescue. Hello, Becky.
Hey, Becky.
Hello.
Becky, can you tell me a bit about what your group does?
Sure. So in 2017, the Western Environment Center started the Humber Valley Fruit Rescue Project. And how it works is homeowners reach out to us when they have, fruit or vegetables that they don't want or they aren't able to harvest themselves for whatever reason. And we send volunteers over, harvest the fruit or veggies, and then it's split up three ways. So 1/3 of it goes back to the homeowner, a third goes to the volunteers that picked, and the other third is donated.
All right. Can you tell me a little bit about what you've rescued so far this year?
This year, it's been primarily apples, which is the norm for us, but we've had some plum picks as well. And right now, we're at about 750 pounds of fruit that has been rescued and donated up to about 300 pounds.
Okay. And, for the volunteers that do the work, what do they get out of it? Going out and picking apples can be kind of fun.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of our, it's a small core group of volunteers that do stick with it since the beginning. And a lot of them, will make cider and pies and applesauce with the apples. But, yeah, they get, obviously, a lot of fresh fruit at their disposal.
So if anyone is listening, they want to start up a fruit rescue in their area, what would you recommend?
Well, so we are volunteer driven, so whoever wants to coordinate it obviously has to have some dedication to it. And finding your core group of volunteers to rely upon is probably the biggest challenge.
Indeed.
And then getting the word out, right, to homeowners that you are even there for their service.
Yeah.
So, that's a challenge, but I think, we little steps at a time. Some years we may only rescue couple hundred pounds, and others, 1,000 pounds. So the flexibility as well, and expectations, need to be flexible as well.
Well, thanks so much, Becky. We've got a few more callers stacked up, so I'm just going to leave you go here for the moment.
Great work, Becky.
No worries.
Thank you. Chris Adams has been waiting very patiently on the phone. Chris is the co-owner of the Newfoundland Cider Company out in Milton. Hello, Chris.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Thanks for holding the line. So listen,
no problem.
How did your company start anyway?
Well, we started the company back in 2016, and the reason we started was we noticed that there was an abundance of apples in our area that were falling to the ground and either going in the ditch or being ran over by the lawnmower or being composted or completely neglected. So we noticed this, and we started to harvest them and press them, make some juice and some cider, and basically that's how it started.
All right, and so tell me what your company has grown into at this point.
Well, right now we produce cider and sell it across the island, and we also have a tasting room where people come in and sample our wild ciders, our forage ciders, and we make cider using not only apples, but we use pears, raspberries, blueberries, cherry, everything in the local area.
Mm-hmm.
And so people are able to come in and sample that at the cidery here, and that's what it's grown into, the tasting room and cider production.
And how much of the fruit that you use for your products is still just wild fruit that's there for the taking?
Yeah, so like this year, it varies from year to year because some years aren't as productive as others. This year, so far, we've harvested, I would say, pretty near on 8,000 pounds, and we're still harvesting.
Wow.
And so people drop them off to us here sometimes. Like we'll get apples of all sorts, we'll get pears, but we are out, we're in the forest, we're along the old rail bed, we're on the seafront, in people's back gardens. We're harvesting wherever we can and trying to save as many local apples as possible.
All right. Now, Barry, you had something you wanted to add there?
Lost my thought there.
Okay, you had two. You had two thoughts there on what you had to say?
But I'll come. We'll have to come back to it.
Come back to it. Jackie, what do you make of that?
I mean, I think it's so great whenever people are able to find ways to kind of prevent food waste, right? I think that it's great, like across the board, finding ways to upcycle foods, to turn foods into different things depending on the type of produce that we have. It's like we were saying, just because a carrot is crooked doesn't mean it doesn't taste just as good. You just might want to use it in a soup or a stew instead of just cooking it to present it in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it's great, and I think food waste varies differently so much across different provinces, and being able to kind of understand how people can help in their specific community is really important. And it sounds like everybody that's been on the program today has found great ways to do that.
All right. Well, listen, Chris, thanks very much, and best of luck with the business.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, that's Chris Adams with the Newfoundland Cider Company out in Milton, Trinity Bay. Yeah, Barry?
Yes, I think as well the public perception is somewhat different as well. When I grew up back in the day, you had what you had. But now in today's world of plenty and different choices, some kids are growing up with the thinking that the only place I can get my food is in a supermarket.
Right.
For example, excuse me. For example, I had my daughter when she was young with her friend down blueberry picking. And my daughter was there, she's eating away at the blueberries, and her friend wasn't touching them. And I said, "You don't like the blueberries?" She said, "I love them." And I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "They're not washed." So, it's the way that we talk to our kids and everything else, too. It's going to make an impact on them.
Okay.
And the kids are the future, I always say.
Okay, that's a good point. I'm going to go back to the phone line now because we have Jackie Felton standing by from St. John's. Hello, Jackie.
Hi, good day. Question for Barry and maybe Jackie. I'd be interested in, or point first, I'd be interested in helping with, at least if you had a network like in the Humber Valley, I've got a few black currants and gooseberries I'd be happy to share to get a third because I hate picking berries.
All right, so you've got some black currants and gooseberries you'd like to share. What can you do with them?
Yeah.
You can, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Well, I pick a bowl full a day when they're ripe. Just have with my yogurt in the morning. Like, why buy fresh fruit when you have it in the garden? I'm not a lover of black currants, but I do make a chutney out of it for lamb.
Huh, okay. That's an idea.
Black currants also are good for sore throats and colds. My grandmother used to use that back in the day as a homemade medicinal purpose.
And actually, I have a beautiful recipe. I think I promised it to Adam. I'll have to get it to him for a gooseberry and peach chutney. And it happens that the Ontario peaches are in the supermarkets here when the gooseberries are ripe.
Oh, okay. That sounds like a good idea because I know that Jackie in Toronto, you guys get Ontario peaches at their very peak ripeness, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. And I imagine it's a challenge to use them all before they go off.
I mean, chutney sounds like a great idea to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, there are a number of recipes for chutney or peach chutney that uses peach, among other things. But my favorite is the one with gooseberries.
Okay, that sounds like an interesting idea. It did put me in mind where, especially in recent years here in Newfoundland and Labrador, we have so many new Canadians living here and newcomers to life in Newfoundland and Labrador. And, for some of them, money's a bit tight, especially in the first few years. But I was thinking, what if you're from a place where you're not familiar with the wild food and the country food of Newfoundland? I'm just thinking of someone who may not have any familiarity with it, and all of a sudden they're given a bucket of partridge berries. I mean, what do you do with that? How can we be better at communicating what you can do with things?
Well, I think, in today's technological world, you can Google most of it. I will speak about one thing, that's the capelin. I love capelin. I love catching capelin. I got a capelin net. I go down to the Middle Cove Beach most times. I cast the net out, and any kids on the beach, I let them pull the net in. I teach them the difference between male and female, etc. And, those capelin then become a learning tool as well as food. And then they eventually go to the food bank.
Okay.
I did have a question for Barry as opposed to a comment. I have no problems with using harvest to donate to a food bank. I just thank the Lord that I don't need to use one myself. But personally, I will not hunt. I think I'd have trouble killing an animal too. I'm frightened death of firearms. But even if I could, as a senior, I think I'd have a bit of trouble getting around now. And same with rabbits. I would have loved to have a piece of that saltfish you're talking about this morning. Is there any way that possibly some of the stuff you can't buy can be distributed, say, to seniors or select groups, just so we could have a taste? I mean, I'd be delighted with one saltfish a year and a couple dozen capelin.
Jackie, I think, yes, Barry wants to say something?
Yeah, so
Same way.
Yeah, you can reach out to me on our Facebook page, Sharing the Harvest NL, and we donate to seniors.
Okay.
Individual seniors at different places.
I'm
as
not
well
greedy
as the food
about
banks.
it. My husband is a mainlander, so he doesn't want any of it anyway. But I'm thankful for, I can buy flippers.
Yeah.
One year I found a gentleman selling skinned rabbits, but I just didn't keep track of his name. But I certainly will. A little treat now and then would certainly come in handy. So what's the something Harvest NL?
Yes, it's called Sharing the Harvest NL.
Sharing the Harvest NL.
That's on Facebook, and you can
Facebook,
my
okay.
phone number is there. You give me a call, and I'll drop you over a meal of whatever I have in the fridge at that given time.
Very good. If I happen to be
some of
blessed
the other
with something, I'll return the favor, but I haven't in a couple years now. So.
Jackie, of Second Harvest, I don't know if a feed of seal flippers comes up very often in your capacity.
Well, you can buy those, so they're not. It's what you can't buy is. Like I certainly wouldn't go to a food bank and pretend I needed it.
Yeah, no. Jackie, I'm talking about the other Jackie who's standing by. Jackie Marchildon from Toronto.
You know what? I bet our food rescue team does have quite a few stories of things, like I said, because we work everywhere. We do we have lots of stuff come up. Earlier this year we had a whole bunch of mussels that our team had to figure out how to move, and like I said, it all comes down to knowing the area and being able to think, okay, we have all of these mussels. It's not every nonprofit that has, the capacity to take something like that, right? That needs to be moved quickly. It needs cold storage. It needs, they need a pretty good kitchen to be able to cook them, right? Mm-hmm. And they did. They moved all of them, and it was great. And it's, such a great meal at a local charity that was able to kind of provide for the community something that, especially in Toronto where we don't have good seafood, people love.
And I guess, too, it's all about putting the right food in, that matches people's culture and matches people's tastes, and, also provides a meaningful experience, too. Barry.
Of course, yeah.
Oh, yeah. No. Yeah. Barry, you were nodding there?
Yes, for senior citizens, that's especially true.
Yeah.
One of the food banks I did was Connections for Seniors, and the last year was the first year I bought and donated rabbits. And they were snared only and cleaned. And when the driver came up to the senior's house and knocked on the door, he came out. And he looked down in the back and said, "What's that?" And she said it was a rabbit. He just about cried because it's been so long since he had a rabbit, and this country food, which has become comfort food, brings the seniors especially back to when they may have been younger, when they perhaps may have been doing it themselves. For families sitting at the table, you're not, this moose meat is so special, you're not going to watch it in front of TV. Mm-hmm. And more than likely, you're involved with kids and have it at the table, spend quality family time together.
Well, I think what they did up in Port Hope Simpson just sounds brilliant to involve the students at the school in butchering the moose and preparing all the different types of food and making sure it gets to community members from it. I'm just wondering, do either of you think that maybe municipalities should be more deeply involved in this sort of thing? Jackie, what do you make of that?
Yeah, I do think municipalities can play a pretty large role from the perspective of public education, for one, really making sure that we're getting the word out. Like I said earlier, something that we're really focused on right now is helping people understand that best before dates aren't the same thing as expiry dates, for instance. We always say best before does not mean bad after, and really getting people to understand that it's a public awareness issue, and that's something that municipalities can really get on board with, I think. And another thing, to the point of involving schools, is kids really, Barry, you said it too. Kids are the future. Kids absorb information like nobody else. And, especially now, they are very engaged in issues like this. And so I think the more that we can engage with young people on the issue of food waste, the more that we'll see change.
Mm-hmm. And I know that on the north coast of Labrador, there are some community freezers in many communities, and they do really, really well. Yeah. Barry, got any thoughts to that?
Yes, I'd love to see a program going to the school as well, and starting in Labrador. It's been there for a while. As mentioned to Chris Peters, St. Paul's, that would be a fantastic program too as well.
Indeed.
But the reality is that schools are so busy; it's hard to find extra activities to put into the school system. So there is another program which a colleague of mine, Paul M. White, has started, and he's getting fish tanks and getting the eggs of wild Atlantic salmon, bring it into the schools and use the water from the river in which they're going to release, puts it in, grows the egg into a little leaven, which is first stage of baby salmon, and then when they become fry, then they're let go in the river itself. And he has the school kids involved in that. So it's a very good program, and he has fly tie incorporated in it as well. So, and the bottom line is that he's teaching kids conservation.
Okay. We're getting near to the end of our hour talking about this. I feel like we could go on forever on it. But just to throw out some suggestions to listeners who may be thinking about how to get food to the people who can distribute it to those who would like it. Barry, can you tell us again the details of your group and what you take and how you get it out?
So right now our web page is down, so you can contact me or us on our Facebook page, Sharing the Harvest NL Incorporated. We will take anything. We will, we will even buy it. If for those of you, especially big game hunters with moose meat, if you're here and around St. John's area, we can provide financial assistance to getting the meat cut up, because we know how expensive things are. We know that hunting is expensive. So we'll look after the financial part of that if we can. Right now we can, and we'd love to get some donations coming in.
Okay, and Jackie Merchilden in Toronto. Second Harvest is a national organization. How can people help?
Sure. So if you're a food business anywhere along the supply chain, and you are looking for ways to divert your surplus food, please do get in touch. You can do so at contact us at foodrescue.ca, or you can go and learn more about all of our different programs at secondharvest.ca. If you are a nonprofit and you are looking to access our app, or you're looking for food, please reach out to the same email address. Like I said, it's contact us at foodrescue.ca, or you can reach out through the website. We're definitely more than happy to talk to anybody that needs food and anybody that wants to get food to us.
And I've been thinking about what Andrew Younghusband was saying about living out in New Melbourne. If you got a bunch of trees with apples or anything falling off it, tell your neighbors. Tell them to come and help themselves. And maybe even, again, apple cider companies. They're always looking they're not going to turn down some free apples. Good idea too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, just sort of ask some questions, have some conversations. Maybe you can do a trade-off. Maybe you've got some apples, somebody else got some fish. Maybe show someone who's new to your community how you can work with, say, partridge berries, if someone doesn't know what a partridge berry is. Or if you've got apples that look a little bit different from the ones in the supermarket, what can you make with them? Right? And Barry, anything else you want to add?
Well, I'd just like to make a plea to the big game hunters of the province once again. My colleague out on the West Coast, Cord Casey, he harvested another moose this year, which is the 17th year in a row for the Salvation Army. And he also reached out to some of his hunting buddies and looking for donations. And he came up with almost 6 quarters of moose. And I don't see any reason why we can't do that here in this side of the island.
All right. Well, listen, Jackie, thank you so much for joining us for this hour.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and Barry, thank you so much for joining us too.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Our guests for the entire hour were Jackie Marchildon from Second Harvest, national food waste organization across Canada, Barry Fordham, Sharing the Harvest NL. We had great calls in from Chris Adams, the Newfoundland Cider Company co-owner, Andrew Younghusband, man about town in New Melbourne with lots of cool ideas, and lots of you, our listeners. Oh, Becky from Humber Valley Fruit Rescue. Yes, lots of things to do with all this surplus fruit falling off the trees, your berries, your meat, your fish. Let's share it all. I'm Heather Barrett. Thanks for listening to The Signal. Talk tomorrow.